This is Mark Hamlin here, and today I'm going to take you through a little bit on finite capacity scheduling in Business Central using our MxAPS product. So what is it? So it's Advanced Finite Capacity Planning and Scheduling. Well, what the heck does that mean? Well, what it does is it generates that schedule that you can actually use on the shop floor and actually execute against. So it will tell you, as good as your model is within Business Central, like your routings and everything else, it'll tell you exactly what you can build, when you can build it, when you can expect it to be done. Is that order going to be late? Is it going to be early? All of those sorts of things is what it does. So what it does really is it takes your existing scheduling process, which is probably run by one or two people that are, geniuses in your organization, or, really know your processes and everything well, right? Those people are hard to find. Those production planners that know how to schedule things and know what needs to get done, they're difficult people to find. So what we want to do is make their lives easier and ensure that if they're, in quarantine or isolation or something for a couple of weeks, you don't grind to a halt. We want to take all of that capability and put it in the system so that you hit a button and it just magically schedules, right? What we're trying to do is really get you to stop using our graphical scheduler, if you will, right? We don't want people to use a graphical Gantt chart to drag and drop operations and those sorts of things. That would be crazy. And we've got organizations out there that do, $1 billion worth of production a year. They're not going to sit there and manually schedule all that production. That would be crazy. All they do is they automatically run the schedule for the morning shift and again for the afternoon shift, and it's hands off. The system does it. We've systemized that whole scheduling process. All right. Now, how can we do that? So MX has a bunch of capabilities. The key one really is the finite capacity forward scheduling. So unlike Business Central, which backwards schedules from your shipment date, your due date, and tells you when you should start the order, which might be in the past or it might be 3 weeks from now, even though you have capacity today. Unlike that, it takes the date that you say you want to start at and forward schedules all your activities to figure out when they're actually going to be done. And the other key point when we talk about Business Central is it does an automatic machine center selection. So what that means is if I have a work center with 3 or 4 different machines in it, or a number of different stations where people work, those sorts of things, all you have to do is schedule your work at that work center, and MX will choose the appropriate machine to run that work on. Again, using that finite capacity scheduling. So what that does is ensures that you're spreading that work out over the appropriate machines, that you're getting your schedule done as quickly as possible, your work done as quickly as possible. And then we also have the ability to do work center alternates or machine center alternates. And what that allows you to do is say, okay, well, if my preferred machines aren't available, I'm going to choose an alternate machine that I can use, even if there's a penalty or something like that associated with that alternate machine. And that alternate machine could be subcontracting as well, right? We could have the system intelligently select when you should subcontract your work versus have late order or whatever, right? So it has that capability to choose those alternates. Now we can do things by production cells. So these configurable rules we'll talk about when we get in there, along with the sequencing. So we can sequence light to dark, hot to cold, all those sorts of things. The lot splitting is also important. If you're running sort of a high volume environment where you've got an order for 10,000 whatever widgets, you're not necessarily going to want to run those all on one machine for the next week and tie everything else up. You might want to split that up in individual lots. So we can do that. And when we split those lots up either by a number of lots or by a specific lot quantity, we can then also split that work across multiple machines as well, or multiple days, or whatever rules you specify. So it does help, again, break up those large orders into more manageable chunks without changing the production orders or anything like that in Business Central. We can also do, sort of net change rescheduling. So if there's a piece of equipment that goes down or you change a priority on a production order or something like that, it's a quick and easy reschedule to take that into account and to update the schedule accordingly. We can also include that equipment downtime. Like if you've got maintenance work that has to be done, we can include that in the schedule as well. So we can block off that machine for a certain period of time and we won't schedule any work on it. In fact, if you really want to get fancy from a maintenance perspective, you can sort of look at the schedule and you can do predictive maintenance, right? So instead of just scheduling, every 30 days, I'm going to maintain this machine, you can look at how many hours are scheduled on that machine for as long as you schedule. And you can say, yeah, by the 31st, I'm going to have 1,000 hours on that machine, so that's when I'm going to do the maintenance. Or you can say by the 31st, I've only run that machine for 600 hours, I don't need to do maintenance yet, and you can skip it. So if you want to get fancy, you can do all that sort of type of investigation with the data that MX generates. We can pretty much model any process within there. So if you've got overlaps, like you're moving, material from one operation to another before it's complete, if there's delays, like you need something to cool down for a certain period of time, any of those sorts of activities that you have in the shop, we can model and we can take care of. There's non-production scheduling. Now, the base version in Business Central today schedules production orders, but you can use it to schedule anything you like. So it's extensible to allow you to schedule whatever you want. And one of the interesting ones that I've seen in the past is people scheduling their shipping and receiving days, right? So again, that's a finite resource. You've only got 10 bays out in the back there, and you've got a lot of material coming in. You want to be able to schedule that and tie it in with your production. So we had one client who was part of the Magna Group, so massive automotive group, and they reduced their inventory levels significantly because they did just-in-time scheduling. They scheduled the receipt of the materials they needed just in time to coincide with their production schedule. And they know exactly when they could bring those trucks in because they knew how many bays they had, and they could schedule that in a finite manner. All right, the multi-segment setup production. So Business Central has, a setup value. Well, we can do multiple setup values. So for example, if I'm an injection molding or something, I might have multi-part setups. I might have to change the tooling or the die. I might have to change the color. I might have to change a whole bunch of things. Well, we can model those things independently. So maybe if I'm doing tooling changeover, that's 2 hours, but a color changeover is only half an hour. So now I can eliminate the tooling changeover and only do the color changeover because I can break apart those setup segments. In fact, we can do any segments you like. So we're talking about setup here, but I can have multiple run segments. I might run something for a period of time and then it has to wait a while and then run again. We can do all of those sorts of things. And then finally, the advanced constraints for material and labor and tooling and everything else. So if I am running a production order that uses the same tooling as a different production order, we can take that into account. We won't schedule those things at the same time. Or if you're missing components or don't have enough labor to complete an activity, we can deal with that. By the way, we can do fractional labor. So if you've got, one person is capable of running 3 machines and you've got enough orders to run it on 6 machines, well, we'll constrain it. We'll only run it on those 3 machines. Okay. Now, these advanced constraints, I'll talk about actually in a sec here. The advanced, so availability, the advanced constraints are going to be available in August sometime. So what you get if you go to AppSource now, you're on Business Central Cloud, you go to AppSource. If you're on the latest version of Business Central, so you have to be on 18.2, you can go and install MX and run it and have it work. That advanced constraints where you can constrain by labor and material and everything else, that's coming to AppSource in August, roughly that time frame. If you're running standalone, so whether you're Business Central or Nav and you want to run the standalone version, all of those capabilities are available now. The standalone version is the one we've been selling for decades or more, and it's widely used. But ideally, if you're running on Business Central, you're going to do the cloud-based version. All right, now a little bit of that experience that we've got. So lots of automotive. So we've got guys like Honda and Ford and Freightliner and all sorts of guys like that using it. We've done a lot of consumer packaged goods and all sorts of different industries that that we can run the system in, right? It's very robust, very flexible, and covers a wide variety of industries. All right, and also different types of scheduling. So all of those different things that you see there kind of tie back into the previous slide. And again, the high mix, low volume, low mix, high volume, you can handle those pretty much equally. It really doesn't matter what you're doing. We can probably handle that scheduling for you. All right, now with that, let's actually see what some of those features look like. So I'm going to jump into Business Central here, and this is our Business Central cloud environment, running in a sandbox environment. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run you through a little bit of the setup that we did to get this going. So for those of you who love scheduling bicycles, we're not going to schedule bicycles today. We've created our own items that we're going to schedule. And what those are going to be these battery boxes. So we're going to schedule some battery boxes. And we've got, stainless steel battery boxes, aluminum battery boxes. We've got ones with short brackets, ones with long brackets, those sorts of things. So we've got, some interesting things to schedule. And so what that looks like, let me bring up the the exploded bomb and routing for this thing. So what we've got here for this battery box, we're going to produce, a whole bunch of these subcomponents, and you can see where we're scheduling all of these components. So notice we're scheduling everything on the work center here, right? So everything is scheduled at the work center level, with the exception of this guy here, which is scheduled on a specific machine center. Because this is a long bracket, we're scheduling this on basically our larger press brake, our 10-foot press brake. We also have other press brakes that we can schedule other things on. But this particular one, we've chosen sort of the preferred machine we want to run this production on. And then a whole bunch of other things, right? So all the standard stuff we're scheduling at the welding center, but we've got multiple welders that could work on it, but we schedule everything at the work center level. So that's basically how we've set this up. The demo data is this battery box with a bunch of components and a bunch of operations we need to schedule. Now, what we're scheduling, if we go back and look at the production orders, what we did was we went in and we created a sales forecast. And from that forecast, we generated, register and standard planning worksheet, generated the production orders, and this is what we're going to schedule. So all of these guys here, and you'll notice the dates here. Now, well, number one, 2020, that's the sort of default demo date for Business Central, the sandbox system. So everything's scheduled in 2020. Just pretend this is 21 or whatever. But you'll notice all of these dates are kind of lumped together, right? Even though we got a ton of production orders here that we really couldn't complete in that period of time, all those dates are lumped together. And that's not that unusual, right? If you're doing a forecast and you're doing weekly or monthly forecasts, you're going to get the date from the forecast, and it's largely going to be lumped together. Or if you're like a typical environment, and I haven't been inside an environment yet that really does dates properly on sales orders, it's Friday afternoon, everybody's typing in their sales orders. Well, what's the shipment date on those sales orders going to be? Probably Friday afternoon. And so when we run MRP, everything's going to have a ship date or a due date of Friday afternoon, and we're running the schedule on Monday, so it's going to tell us to start that production 2 weeks prior to last Friday. Well, that's no good. So anyway, this is fairly realistic. We've got a bunch of dates lumped together, and they're probably all goofy, but we'll see how the system handles that. So these are the production orders we're scheduling. Now, if you want to look at what Business Central does with those production orders, again, we've entered a bunch of sales orders, so if you've got a forecast, Business Central will schedule those production orders based on the routings and everything else. It'll go out and it'll generate, that schedule for us. And how do we look at that schedule in Business Central? Well, the best bet is to go in and install our graphical scheduler tool, right? So graphical scheduler is that free tool that's available on AppSource for Business Central Cloud. And if I open that up, what it's going to do is it's going to show me what Business Central has done with those production orders. And what it is not all that pretty, right? So it's got, oh, and by the way, I should just mention that, with the graphical scheduler, you can come in and you can create whatever views you want and everything else. And I've created a view here, or basically just modified the default view to have some color rules and things like that. But you can really extend this to do almost anything you like. But what I've done basically is I've got this thing up, and this is the schedule that Business Central has created for us, and it's kind of terrible, right? Because all it's doing is it's taking your due date, backwards scheduling, and telling me, what I've got on my routing. So all of these kinds of things, we've got all of these, operations scheduled on these various days, and I just set up the color rules to kind of show, red is overloaded, orange is not scheduled, and blue is maybe okay. But you can see here on this laser, right? All it did was it took those dates and it dumped everything on the laser pretty much in the same day or same couple of days. So this really doesn't help me from a scheduling perspective, right? I could never execute the schedule that Business Central has created for me. I might get, rough sequence that I need to follow to figure out what to do next, but it doesn't tell me which machine to use. It doesn't tell me how much capacity it's actually going to take, any of those sorts of things, right? Because I've got 2 laser cutters here, but it's gone in, and because we set up that routing to be on the work center, it's scheduled everything on the main work center, and these machines are blank. So now what would you do in a case like this? Well, if you're using our graphical scheduler or some Gantt chart type tool, I could come in here and I could, click on this and I could drag it over to where I want to schedule. And I could do that for, the 300 operations or whatever that's on here. And I could spend all my day dragging and dropping stuff to schedule. Well, who wants to do that? That sucks. I wouldn't want to do it. But that's kind of what you're stuck with in Business Central today. So instead of doing that, instead of that drag and drop type stuff, What we want to do is we want to systemize that process. We want the system to tell us what's a good schedule. So what I do is I just hit this generate production schedule. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say I'm going to do a schedule starting, actually let's do 8 a.m. So basically this is tomorrow at 8 a.m. that I'm going to schedule for. I hit generate schedule, and what it's going to do, it's going to take all the information in Business Central, all the same stuff that was generated from your MRP run, right, to standard, in this case, firm plan production orders. It sends all that data out, generates the schedule, and brings me back my results. Now, what you see on this screen here, this is a list of all the schedules that have been done since the beginning of time, right? So, and this allows you to do what ifs, right? So if I look at, something like this, I went and I ran the schedule, and you can set the description for what you actually did here. But I ran the schedule and I had 21 late orders. Well, that's no good. I don't want 21 late orders. So I played with the schedule and played with it until I got to where I am now. And I've now got, 56 orders that are either on time or early. Everything looks good here, and I'm good to go. Now, the reason I brought this up is there's a configuration setting I've got that launches the screen as soon as I run a schedule. But you can also have it just automatically commit that schedule to Business Central without any review whatsoever. It could launch the graphical scheduler. It could do a whole bunch of different things. But what this allows you to do is come in, open up the schedule results, and this is the details of that schedule. Now, unless you're sort of troubleshooting things, you might not actually go in here. But, for example, if I wanted to come in and see what's, happening on this particular machine center, let me just expand that so we can see the numbers. Right, I want to see what's happening on welding booth 1. I can just hit Alt F3, filter that, and I can see that machine level schedule. So this is handy as well, right? I mean, this tells me exactly what has to happen on that machine, when it has to start, when it ends, all sorts of different things that you can see there. And this is that lot splitting stuff I talked about, right? If we wanted to break up, this thing into, lots of 2 or 3 or something like that, we could do it. Anyway, so this view lets me basically review all the details of that schedule, but you're probably not going to look at this. Normally what you're going to do is you're going to run the schedule. You want to do a quick once over to make sure it's looking good. And that quick once over could be as simple as just going, yep, everything's scheduled and it's all basically on time or early. I'm good with it, and you commit the schedule. But if you want to do a little slightly more detailed once over, I hit graph results, and now we can actually see what the system did to actually generate that schedule for me. So this is the same information you saw before, but it is now being run through the MX engine, and it's now telling us what that schedule looks like. And it looks a whole lot different. You can see on that laser thing I showed you earlier, it's now taken everything off that work center and it's chosen the appropriate machine center to run it on. And how does it know what machine center is appropriate? Well, it'll select that based on a lot of different criteria, right? Maybe the size of the part you're running, because we've got different size laser cutters here, the capacity available for it, the runtime, all sorts of different criteria that you can throw at it if you want. Now, what I've done here is basically nothing. I've just used the built-in, well, not built-in, but the standard work center in Business Central that we schedule the other production orders on without MX, and it's just gone in and figured out which one to use, right? And let me just go down into welding here for a sec too. So same thing on welding. It all was scheduled on the the work center. It's now chosen the appropriate machine center to schedule that on. So the different welding booths or employees that you want to schedule. Now, the interesting thing about this, I mentioned earlier, we've got 2 different types of products that we're producing. One is aluminum and one is stainless steel. So if you look at this description here, you can see just above my pointer here, it says AL, that's the aluminum. So here we can see we scheduled aluminum and then aluminum, and now we're over to stainless steel, and then we did stainless steel, and then once we're done that, we'll flip back over to aluminum and so on and so forth. So what this has done, this is actually sequencing that product. It's doing all the aluminum first. When we're out of that, it's doing all the stainless steel, and then it's going back to aluminum. So we can set up those sequencing rules to decide how we're going to sequence that product through a specific work center or across the board. Okay, now let's go and look at this guy real quick. And some of these were complete, so we kind of, this looks a little weird. But I can come in here and I can say, you know what, this operation here, this is a long bracket. And you'll notice it's come up here and scheduled it on this 120-ton press brake. This bracket is normally scheduled. This is the one I showed you way back. You probably don't remember. When I showed you that item structure, the preferred work center or machine center that we want to run this particular bracket on, this long bracket, is actually this 10-foot break down here. But you'll notice when this guy finishes, that press brake is in use. It's got no room to put that press brake on this machine center, which is our preferred machine center. So what it's done is it's gone in and it's chosen an alternate machine center. Even though there are penalties to using this machine center, right? Longer setup time, longer run time, maybe more expensive to run, all those sorts of things. It's decided the best way to schedule it is to choose this alternate work center. And that's what I mentioned about subcontracting, right? This could just as easily be a subcontract work center, and it could have chosen that because even though there's additional costs and all sorts of things associated with it, that subcontract might make the most sense. So it'll intelligently make those decisions, right? And down here, the other option it could have done is on some of these, like it could have left a big gap here, right? It could have said, you know what, I'm going to wait for this and schedule it down here on my preferred work center. Now, what would have happened is we would have ended up with a larger gap, and we don't want those gaps in the shop floor, right? We want as tight a schedule as possible, because when we run into gaps on the shop floor, that means one of two things. People are going to be sitting around doing nothing, or they're going to be finding other work to do. And the first option is the better option. Rather have them do shop cleanup or something else. Because what ends up happening, and I see this a lot when people use built-in, sort of MRP type scheduling, like the Business Central scheduling, right? Stuff will go out there and there won't be a well-defined sequence or anything else. And they'll finish their work and there's a big gap before they can start their next thing. And they'll go, oh, there's a pallet of stuff over here. I'll just start on that instead. And they'll grab another production order to work on. Well, that screws everything up potentially, because now they're working on that. And the guy that's waiting next is now going to be waiting because the stuff the first guy was supposed to be doing isn't ready. So he starts something different. And then the downstream operation there is waiting. And all of a sudden, you've got a huge mess of WIP in your shop. So anytime I go into a shop and there's a lot of WIP sitting around on the floor and everybody still looks busy, either you have a capacity problem, or just as likely, you have a scheduling problem. People are sort of doing local optimization of that schedule, if you will, which is almost certainly happening to a lot of you today. You're putting out a schedule that isn't really a real schedule. It's more like a, try and get it done in this order type of thing. And people are finding things to work on that they think make more sense, and it probably doesn't. And you've got stacks of WIP all over the place that you don't know what it's for, and orders are going to be late and all sorts of stuff. So that's why you want something like MX, right? MX is going to go in there and it's going to give you a schedule that people can follow to ensure your orders get done properly and on time. Now, I was talking about subcontracts, so I'm just going to go down here and just talk a little bit on the subcontract stuff. So this powder coating here, this, you'll notice I didn't set up any color rules for this. This is a subcontract operation. So you can see here, we've stacked up multiple operations on top of one another because we don't care about the capacity for subcontract. And so what this means is I just say, yeah, the vendor said they can get it done in a week, so I schedule it for a week, throw it on subcontract, and we can see that on the schedule, but it doesn't impact the rest of our capacity really at all. And this is very useful because what we've done here on the subcontract, we've said that's an infinite capacity machine. So Business Central by default is infinite capacity. Everything it schedules, it thinks you can do as much as you throw at it on a single machine. Well, we can turn that on a machine by machine basis. So what that means is it helps us spot bottlenecks, right? So the idea is, like, let's say I've got, and MX can tell you what a bottleneck is, right? Right now, today, if you go, oh man, what's slowing us down? You got to run around the shop and figure out what's going on. MX can tell you, hey, you've got this machine, it's got high utilization, high queue time, because it calculates that queue time automatically. And you know what that bottleneck is. And then you say, well, how do I fix that? Well, today you might have to send somebody out there for a day with a stopwatch and a clipboard trying to figure out what they can do. Do we add a new person? Do we run a second shift? Do we subcontract? How do we deal with this? Well, MX can tell you that. You can run this thing, say, this guy is now infinite capacity. Let's see what happens. Let's see how much I actually need to get this thing done, right? Do I need to start that second shift? So it does give you all the information you need to make those kinds of decisions. All that data is in the system. All right, enough of that. Now, let me think. Oh, you know what? I didn't even mention the colors, which is one of the first things you probably noticed. So, this magenta type color here, let me just exit out of that. That magenta type color, that's our setup, right? And the green is the runtime. And you can change those colors to whatever you like. But this is nice because we break out the setup independently of the runtime. And again, that goes to if I have a multi-part setup. I have color change and tooling change. I can break that up into multiple segments and show that on the graphical scheduler here, as individual segments. And we can do, segments after runtime, right? Maybe I've got a cool down or a wait time or something like that. You can have an unlimited number of segments if you like. Business Central really has 4, technically 5 if you include the queue time you have to manually set on the work center, but it's got setup, run, wait, and move. Well, we can take all of those, sort of standard ones, and we can extend them to have whatever you like. Most people don't really need that, but it's there, right? And again, then we can do that setup minimization. We can group these things together to say, hey, if I'm doing these things back to back, I'm going to eliminate that setup, or I'm going to eliminate part of that setup time. And it'll look for opportunities to reduce that setup time to improve your efficiency in the shop floor. All right. Let me see. Anything else I need to talk about on this thing? I think not. I think that's good. All right. So now, how did I go about, getting all that to work, right? So what I did was I hit that button. It took 10 seconds, and I've got this finite capacity schedule that's highly efficient. I can send it out to the shop floor. If they follow it, everything's going to work fine, and everything's going to be good. So what did I actually do to set that up? Well, let's actually look at the configuration. So what I'll do is I'll go into the MxAPS setup here, and all I've really done is a couple of things. One, I ran the assisted setup, which you have to do when you first install it, and it basically sets everything that you see here gets automatically set when I run that assisted setup. And I just wanted to point out, a couple of things on here. Number one, well, this is where we set up, map the segments you define to sort of the built-in Business Central stuff. And I wanted to mention this order priority because we have the ability to prioritize orders. The default here is 5, so every production order will get a priority of 5. But the nice thing about this is I could go in and I could say, our customer just phoned up and yelled at me. I can go to that production order and bump the priority, and next time I schedule it, it's going to pull that forward. Or you could have your own rules in the system, right? You create a little extension that says, hey, when I create a production order for this customer or for this product type or whatever, I'm going to bump that priority to make sure it gets done first, right? So I'm running a campaign and I want to make sure that all those products get finished first, or I've got a customer that always has to get done first. You can set that on the fly on those production orders. Okay, the other thing to mention here, let's go into the configuration. Let's talk a little bit about the scheduling rules. Now, you can create as many rules as you like here. And a rule is really how we actually build that schedule up. And this can also be done on a per work cell basis. So you can have production cells and you can have different scheduling rules per cell. So what does that look like? So in this particular one, we come in here and just our standard rule 1, we've got a whole bunch of parameters that it uses to generate our schedule, basically to sequence that schedule. So the first one is priority. So anything with a higher priority is going to be scheduled first. But then we look at due date. If everything has the same priority, it looks at the due date and tries to schedule it in that order. And finally, we've got this, well, not finally, but this user 2 option here, which is actually the aluminum versus stainless steel sequencing. So you can create as many user attributes as you like, and you can go in and have it sequence based on that. So again, color is a common one, right? I'm going light to dark, and then when we get to dark, we flip back to light. And the way we do that is with this rule logic, basically the algorithm we use here. So this just sorts it in ascending order, but we can do things like a sawtooth, right? So I go light to dark, and then when I get to dark, it drops down and starts at light again. And if you want to get really fancy, we could even set it up so that when we go from dark to light, we've got an additional time blocked off there for additional setup, because there's more time required to go from, black back down to white. We've got to flush everything out and everything else. So there's all sorts of things you can do here. And the triangle, that's for furnaces or foods or something where you're cooking, where I want to start, everything that's starting at a lower temperature, like heat treating is a good one. I start my lower temperature heat treating and ramp up to the higher temperature and then ramp back down to the lower temperature, those sorts of things. You can do that type of thing. So you can really schedule by almost anything you want here. There's all sorts of stuff you can schedule or create rules for to schedule by. But this is kind of the standard, right? It's priority, due date, and then production order number and some other things that you can set. Okay, so that's all again set by default. The only thing we added there was that user 2 to sequence by aluminum or stainless steel. The other thing that I did was we went in here, and this alternate groups tells us what we can use in place of the preferred machine center. So you remember on that long bracket where it was by default scheduled on the 90-ton press brake. Well, what I can do is I can come in here and I can say, well, I chose the wrong one. Let's just hit next. I can come in here and I can say, you know what? There's an alternate of this 120 ton that I can use instead. And maybe I can even go in here and say, in addition to that internal sort of press that we've got, I can also do potentially subcontracting. And I can say subcontracting is going to add 48 hours to that time frame, and it's going to take whatever 10 times as long to schedule or whatever it happens to be. So I can add penalties on here. I can add additional run times, all sorts of things. And you notice this 120-ton press brake. When I schedule on that, it takes twice as long to set up, and it actually runs a little slower, 10% slower. So we can set all of that type of stuff up as well. So these are the penalties that the system looks at to decide, does that make sense or not? Okay. All right, so those are the machine alternates, and that's really it. That's all I've set up in addition to sort of the standard Business Central configuration. So really what that means is you can go to App Source, install this thing, basically with no changes whatsoever. I'll install it, run assisted setup, and then basically with nothing else, you can hit run, generate a schedule, and it'll generate a finite capacity schedule for your existing data. Right? And one other thing I didn't mention when I do the schedule here, I didn't talk about much of this stuff. It's not really that important, but one other thing I'll mention is you can come in here and filter by, I just want to filter or schedule released orders or firm planned orders or whatever, so you can control what you've actually scheduled. All right, now let's actually have a look at what else we add onto the base Business Central configuration. So I'm going to go into routings here, and I'm going to choose one of these guys. Let's choose this guy here for fun. So what we're going to do is have a look at this particular routing. So this is very simple. It's just the final welding or whatever. And all of this is standard Business Central stuff, right? Everything on this routing is standard Business Central until we get over here. So starting right about here is where we can see the additional things we can do. And as I lied, you know what? I'm going to go and grab one of the brackets here instead. Let's grab, what did I want to do? I can't remember where it is. Anyway, yeah, this guy here. We'll see if this is the guy. I lied, it's not the guy. All right, here's the guy. So this bracket here, same thing, all the standard Business Central stuff. And starting here is where we can start adding additional capabilities that MX will look at. So here's a machine alternate, right? So here we've said, if I just scroll back real quick, our preferred machine is this 90-ton brake, 10-foot brake. But if that is not available for any reason, we get to choose an alternate work center out of this list here. So the subcontract or the 120-ton or whatever additional things you put in there. And it'll intelligently make that decision based on how good the schedule is on each of those alternates. So it'll say, hey, is the subcontract one better? It'll kind of run a schedule to see if the subcontract one works. If that doesn't work, it'll do it for the 120-ton, and it'll make the best choice. So it doesn't just randomly grab one. It actually schedules it out and chooses the best choice. And then there's a whole bunch of options we can do here. So I'm not going to get into these in a lot of detail, but things like this allow breaks is really nice. This allows all of these additional settings really allow us to model your process a lot better. So for example, this breaks allowed means, are we allowed to interrupt that operation? If I'm doing extrusion, or if I've got a heat treat, or something that can't just be stopped in the middle, right? I'm not going to just turn off the oven, start my my oven at 4:30 and then turn it off at 5 and start it up next morning at 8 a.m. It won't schedule an operation if it means it's going to be broken up across multiple shifts or different machines. So things like that really do help with the schedule. We can do just-in-time scheduling, a whole bunch of different things. This max days early and days late is also nice, right? If you're thinking about foods or something like that, or anything where we don't want to manufacture things too early. Maybe I manufacture something and the production order is 3 weeks early. Customer doesn't want it for 3 weeks. Well, by the time I ship it, maybe the expiration date is almost due, right? We want to set it up so that it actually only schedules this at a point where we still have a reasonable amount of time before we ship it to the customer. Same thing with maximum days late. I can say, you know what, if this order is going to end up being too late, don't schedule it, and it'll basically flag it as an exception. And I can go in and go, okay, why, didn't this one schedule? And I can increase the priority or do something to make sure we get that order out. Whole bunch of different things we can do here. The other thing I'll mention on this is the lot splitting. So this is what I talked about earlier, where I can go in and I can say, you know what, every time I manufacture these things, I'm doing 2,000 of them at a time. So I'm going to break that up into 20 lots, and I can explicitly indicate the number of lots I want it to be broken up into. So whether I make 2,000 or 200, it's going to break it up into 20 lots or whatever I put here. Or I can say, you know what, break it up into lot quantities of 100. And then I can also define whether I want to be able to schedule those lots on different machines. So now, if I've got 5, whatever CNC machines or molding machines, and I have enough tooling and everything else, I could split that one order up across 5 different machines automatically. Okay, so it's all sorts of good stuff that we can do here. Here's our user 1, user 2 stuff that you can add, where I can specify anything I want here to sequence by. Right, the aluminum and stainless steel were the examples. So that's, basically it. There's a few additional things, right? When we go in, we can look at on the work centers, we add a little bit of additional information that, that's optional if you really want. But you can come in here and add in some additional details, like is this, a machine that we respect the capacity on, or is it an infinite capacity machine, and a few other things we can set here. But basically, that's it, right? You install this from AppSource, you run assisted setup, you'll get a finite capacity schedule. If you want to do more than that, like the machine alternates and setting up different machine centers, all those sorts of things, you go in there, plug those in, and you're done. You run the schedule and you're happy, right? That's really all there is to it. All right, let me jump back into the presentation here for a sec. Hopefully this is all keeping up good. All right, so let's talk about how this is priced and the value proposition. So you can see it's extremely powerful, right? And where we've typically run the solution is really on much, very large customers. I mentioned the billion-dollar, parts plant that runs it. There's automotive assembly plants. There's 4 in Ohio that run it. There's a whole bunch of these larger organizations that run it. So there's, they're getting good value out of it. But even if you're a very small organization, you've got 10 or 20 people there, you will see benefit out of it. And I'm not going to go through each one of these things in detail. But basically WIP reduction, improved delivery dates, reduced inventory, all of those sorts of things come into play when you have a good schedule. Okay. And that one I mentioned, that Magna one earlier, that one was a good one. I think it was like 80% in a reduction in finished goods and WIP inventories, but all sorts of stuff here you can see. Resource utilization, it basically makes the most use out of your assets that it can. And that helps you figure out, hey, do I need to decommission these machines? What's going on? I'm never using them anymore because I've got a better schedule, all sorts of stuff like that. All right, now what's that all going to cost you? So the way it's currently priced, and this is likely to change next year, so it's kind of, I won't say it's intro pricing, but this year for 2021, it's priced by production orders. So if you have 200 production orders in your system, it'll schedule those 200 production orders. If you add an extra 10 and you're licensed for 200 production orders, it'll give you an error message because it won't schedule anything more than what you're licensed for. So there's no user-based licensing. It's not by planner, by location, by anything. It's by company and production orders. And the pricing right now is actually quite low. The intro pricing for smaller companies, everything I showed you today, I think is about $150 US a month to get you all of that. And then it goes up from there depending on how many production orders you're scheduling. Now that advanced constraints that I mentioned earlier, where you can constrain by labor or material or tooling, those sorts of things, that'll be coming in August to the cloud version. The on-prem version already has that, but that'll add 25% to the cost. So you just add 25% to whatever you're paying and you're good, right? So again, a small organization, it doesn't even have to be a small organization. I think the limit is 75 production orders. You're under $200 a month, and it's 10 seconds or a minute or whatever it takes, depending on on the complexity of your orders to generate a schedule. You push it out to the shop floor and you're done. Okay. And again, the pricing is very likely to increase next year. Okay, now with that, if you have any additional questions about anything you've seen today, give us a shout. Go to the website. There's a contact form you can talk to us on. There's also additional webinars like this coming up on Shop Floor Insight, which again is a good companion tool for making sure you get that timely information back into Business Central. If you want to watch some recorded videos on Shop Floor Insight or any of the other products, Graphical Scheduler or the free warehouse management solution, you can go to the webcast area and watch those. If you need a quote or pricing and your partner is one of our resellers, get in touch with them. They should be able to help you out. All right. With that, I'd like to thank everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great content.